Optimove, the leader in positionless marketing, frees marketing teams from the limitations of fixed roles, boosting campaign efficiency by 88%. Its positionless marketing platform delivers 3 transformative powers: data power for real-time customer insights, creative power for instant asset creation, and optimization power for self-optimizing campaigns. With Optimove, you can do anything and be everything. Go to optimove.com/total retail to get your first month free when buying Optimove's positionless marketing platform.
Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, the editor-in-chief of Total Retail, and I'm pleased to be joined on today's episode by Rene Federico. Rene is the head of marketing for the U.S. for Primark, and we're going to talk to Rene about the growth of that business, particularly here in the U.S. across its physical stores, a little bit about the efforts around marketing to help support that growth, and a little bit about what's to come and some of the exciting things in the future from Primark. So, Rene, thanks for taking the time to join me on today's show.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
So to get us started, I would love for you to give a little bit of a brief overview of the Primark business. I think probably most of our audience is familiar with it, but just in case some aren't, tell us a little bit about Primark.
Sure. Primark is a fashion retailer founded and based in Dublin, Ireland. We operate globally throughout Europe, the UK, the United States, and a few other markets that we're entering now globally. In the US, we've been in operation. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary here in the United States. So we have had stores in the United States. We're headquartered US here. Our US headquarters is in Boston, which is where I'm based out of. And we currently operate 33 stores in the US, and we're growing.
So thank you for that. It provides a kind of a good context for the conversation we're going to have. I'd love also to get a little bit of insight into each of my guests, their individual role, their career. Tell me a little bit about your role at Primark and anything else that would be kind of relevant for the audience in terms of your career leading up to Primark.
Sure. So my role currently as head of marketing for Primark US really is to start to build our strategies and capabilities against a fully integrated marketing offense, right? So as our store growth has started to pace up, as we're finding that we have more and more opportunity in the US, it really is now the time to kind of reflect and say, okay, how can we best drive our business through sort of all major business partner functions? And marketing is certainly a very, very key in that. So, and we're really tasked with, hey, how can we build awareness for our brand in this market? And then how can we continue to kind of tell our story as a brand and connect with consumers and drive our message to new audiences and new customers. My career has always, I started, Joe, as a retail sales associate part-time when I was still in college. So I've always, had a particular passion about retail. I spent most of my career before Primark, essentially all of my career before Primark at Nike, working through positions here in Boston, in New York, and out at their headquarters in Oregon. And, I would say essentially retail has always been in my DNA, and I've always sort of gravitated toward roles where I can be close to consumers and I can help drive connectivities between brands and consumers.
And it's a perfect lead into what we want to talk in terms of bridging those communities between brands and communities and consumers. You talked about 10 years, I believe, Primark here in the U.S., 10-year birthday. So congrats on that. Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned kind of building that brand. Obviously, it is kind of established and structured brand in Europe. It's based in Dublin. But as you came to the U.S., you needed to kind of create that consumer awareness. Talk about the strategies you've implemented and what you found effective in terms of building that brand awareness and relevance here in the United States.
Yeah, I would say, Joe, we're right on the starting line on this. So, I think for our first step was really kind of understanding our U.S. consumer and going out to get the insights to understand, hey, where are our strengths and where is there headroom for us to kind of get in the path of consumers and get our message out there. And then also, where do we know that we have gaps that we need to bridge? So first and foremost for us was like, what's the right message for our brand, given how known we are to the US consumer, right? Which is going to be different from how they can market in the UK and Europe, a brand that has been there for 50 years, quite well known and has a lot of density on the high street and in shopping areas. So, what's the right message? And then what is the right time to deliver that message to the US consumer? And then, really, I believe as a marketer, consistency. So in sort of your strategic framework of how you want to drive marketing activity, how are you going to do that in a way that's consistent, that you're not just going to kind of launch it and leave it, but you're finding ways to drive consistency in your ability to show up on the right platforms and right channels for your audiences. But consistency and great creative was our starting point, right? So, how do we use our creative assets to convey our proposition and our message around style, quality, and affordability? How do we get the right social media and influencer strategies in place? How do we make sure we're always finding a relevant way to tell our story to our customers? And I would say the third thing, and this can come in many forms, but I think you have to be inspirational and aspirational in some ways. You really do have to, especially because the marketplace is so crowded right now. You really have to find ways to deliver a message that's going to resonate with consumers on an emotional level.
So we actually had the pleasure of meeting a few weeks ago at Shop Talk, and you were on stage. And so I'm going to take you kind of from one spectrum, kind of that top of the funnel, building brand awareness, all the
Yeah.
way to the other end of the spectrum in terms of engendering loyalty and kind of creating those long-term relationships. So you spoke on a panel at Shop Talk about building brand resiliency and retention. So with that in mind, maybe you could talk to our audience about what Primark is doing to deepen that trust and loyalty with its customers. And particularly at a time, as you mentioned, where there's kind of this economic caution, there's shifting expectations for consumers. So loyalty is fleeting, really. So what are you doing at Primark to hopefully capture the loyalty of your customer?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it was an incredible topic to be able to speak on. It's so important now, and one of the things that is so special about Primark is that our store experience is the anchor of our loyalty and retention. Our store operations, how we're able to really deliver at the moment of truth for customers through our stores drives a tremendous amount of retention for us. We have some very impressive numbers in terms of would shop again, how we rank against competitors based on certain factors. So that really is something that is an ownable, distinctive. We're a market leader in that in terms of delivering on our store experience. So that's great because that's hard to fix, as you know, Joe. I mean, you talk about this industry day in and day out. When your store experience is broken, it is a steep hill to climb to get consumers back through the door. So we're very fortunate, and I feel very fortunate as a marketer that our store experience is so solid. So our job to do is really, how do we make sure that that value, that exceptional experience, we can drive excitement and engagement around that. And essentially, we don't make customers chase us to entice them into our stores. We just want to repeatedly tell them that, hey, it's about great style, great value, and great quality. And we're not asking them to compromise to have to be able to experience that. So it's not about waiting for some discount cycle or trying to drive them in store by using those discount cycles to attract shoppers, which becomes very transactional, right? And it's not about having to purchase last season's styles and trends just so that they can be affordable. So I think, essentially, it's really about understanding how great a store experience that we have, and then how can we sort of grow visibility for that so that we're continuing to drive more foot traffic and more transactions.
Would you say it is, and you spoke about consistency, Renee, reinforcing those core tenets of style, rather, quality and value, and getting them to experience that in store and that same, getting that consistent messaging from Primark. That's current kind of where you're investing and thinking about how you're messaging your consumer.
Absolutely. I mean, right, and it's through multiple channels and platforms, right? So it's, through authentic voices that as it relates to social and influencer activity. It's about marketing our products and ranges, uh, across multiple channels. So because they are so on trend and they do convey style and they do have messages around price and affordability. And we know how powerful it is when a customer can find styles they love at a great price, and all that comes packaged in a store experience that's exceptional. And so we're just trying to put the power of that at play and really market to help, again, drive that connectivity and create Primark shoppers.
And I want to go back to something you said earlier too, and also you want to make it inspirational and kind of aspirational for the consumer. When we talked at Shop Talk, one of the things that I had marked down is you still want to create that and highlight that the joy of shopping, right? And making this a fun experience and inspirational. Tell us a little bit about how you think about that as part of the overall messaging, while still obviously driving home the tenets of style, affordability, and quality.
Yeah, I mean, that's a premise that really we ground our creative briefs in, that we think about every day. Are we delivering? We know the power of shopping for our customers, and really the joy that you experience through being able to, again, find a quality piece at the right price, to be able to afford everything on your list, to be able to participate in the latest trends and styles, to find everything you might need for your family, to even sort of treat yourself in the moment just while you're out in a store. And so we use conveying that feeling of joy as the premise for how we brief our marketing messaging and create. And we really want to deliver that. And we deliver it in many dimensions. Again, and just part of having an exceptional store experience delivers joy for our customer. I mean, we truly believe in that. And that's the message that we wanna convey as well. Again, it's not about sacrificing or compromising, especially in an environment today where a lot of that is happening, right? You feel like you have to make a lot of difficult choices about where to spend your money, how to spend your money. And we just really wanna be very transparent with customers and shoppers and say, "We have the best prices, we have the best value, we have exceptional quality, and you can find exceptionally good basics and everything in style on trend."
You provided me a good segue into you think about balancing investments and where you're potentially focusing, and not necessarily even channel, but the messaging too is, as you think about that upper funnel brand awareness that you talked about and creating consumer awareness for Primark here in the United States, but also conversion focused strategies, right? So
Sure.
thinking about a little bit more of less brand awareness, a little bit more intent on conversion. How do you kind of think about balancing the two, getting that right mix so that you're achieving your goals?
Well, we look at that in a few ways. One, I would say the funnel is evolving because of the way that consumers experience media. And so I mean, obviously, fundamentally, you have to fill the top of the funnel to deliver the bottom of the funnel. I think that is still fundamentally true. However, I think more and more the funnel is turning more horizontal, where there are entry points and exit points that are more on sort of like a linear access than a top to bottom access. And so I think that's where you have to look at creating more balance in your strategies, in your marketing strategies, in terms of making sure that typically your most high investment marketing activity comes at the top of the funnel and you can drive a lot of efficiency in the bottom, which is the case. But I do think that top and middle is becoming more evenly spread out. And there's more marketing channels that kind of almost run the full length of the marketing funnel. And I think it's interesting because a lot of data comes up as a result of that, that would say, okay, do this and don't do that, and do this and don't do that. And I say that, I'm always cautious about the fact that you really have to have conviction in how powerful your brand is and what you mean to consumers or audiences. Because if you just follow the data, you're really just following the past. You're really looking backwards. And so I think you have to take the data and have it inform where you think you have the potential to get to. But for us, honestly, Joe, we're looking at saying, what is the job we're trying to do? How can we, again, create more awareness for our brand? We just have to put ourselves in the mind space of people. And then how can we continue to ensure that we remain top of mind when they're going to make choices around shopping for style or fashion for themselves or their families?
And I think you raise an interesting point in how some channels have become inclusive of more of the funnel, right? Where, 10 years ago, they would have been thought as awareness channels. Now they can be, they stretch the gamut and can be looked at as conversion. I thinking about social, linear TV. These are channels, and I think believe that Primark is using a mix of these from linear TV and out of home and social platforms such as Instagram, TikTok. Whereas previously they were thought about awareness, now the shopping journey and conversion can actually happen through some of these channels.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even in the course of, obviously there's been an acceleration of this,
Mhm.
I would say, over the last 5 years, right? But now what used to be considered traditionally TV, well, streaming's been around for a long time, but now TV is shoppable. Social, there's, social is shoppable. So there are so many factors where you used to be able to outline a customer journey to say point A to point B to point C. And that does still exist among some consumer segments. And so you have to understand how important how people shop and what that segment is, how important that is to your business. But for the most part, right now, it is a non-linear journey. So a social influencer could potentially drive more transactional value for you than an above the line TV campaign. And those social influencers are now almost as expensive as some of what would be considered top tier or mid tier funnel activity. So you really have to understand that, again, it's becoming more horizontal, the entry points to the funnel and where they may take you. So often there are some mid to bottom funnel metrics that are actually pushing customers and audiences back up to view or participate in more of your above the line top funnel activity. So they actually know about a product or think about the viral items, right? Things that go viral. Often people know about an item before they really even know your brand story or your overall message, right? So I think we have to keep that in mind as marketers as it's a nonlinear journey. The customer journey used to be very point A to point B. It's more nonlinear now. And so how can you make sure your investment shows how you're able to deliver against that nuance?
And I guess that leads to the whole conversation around attribution, right, Renee? So, all these
Yeah.
different nonlinear journey. So, what's driving what behavior becomes then the challenge. And you might not have the silver bullet answer to it, but how do you think about attribution? What are you doing at Primark to stitch together those journeys so you best understand to your possibilities how the consumer ultimately ends up maybe in a Primark store and converting?
Right. I think that the first thing for me, Joe, is so much of what marketing does is it gets categorized as unattributable. And so my first step in that, having those conversations, is to really create a lot of clarity around what is attributable and why, and really build a lot of consensus and advocacy for a mindset that says there's a lot of ways marketing can be attributable. Certainly, return on spend is one of them, but there's lots of other ways that marketing helps drive equity and long-term value for brands that doesn't provide an immediate sale. The second, and a big component of that is by saying, hey, look, the art is as important as the math. Your brand perception, especially in an industry, we're in the fashion industry, right? So 80% of fashion decisions are made based on brand perception. So we have to be very aware of that. So in that equation, although the math is very important, the art and the creative with which we express ourselves as a brand is also very important. And not every outcome can be measured on, some 30-day dashboard. We have to be confident and have conviction in our strategies so that we are looking short term and long term, that on the path between the wallet and the heart and mind, we know exactly what we expect to get out of all the activity within that. So, but it is a conversation that comes up quite a bit because performance marketing and high ROI activity, especially, since e-commerce is such high penetration for most businesses, you have to be very clear on how you feel you can drive equity, and it has to range beyond just traditional return on investment calculations.
And this doesn't, my follow up to that, and this doesn't necessarily pertain just to Primark and the work that you're doing. This is just across industries, actually, in terms of, is it still that left brain, right brain, where the creative and the analytical side of the marketer, that's really essential in terms of how you're thinking about marketing strategy today, is that you kind of need to have both, right? And that's going to be critical for success going forward.
Absolutely, because when you do brand marketing, right? There's marketing tactics, but when you do brand marketing well, right? Driving a perception for your brand, and that will affect behavior, loyalty, and the legacy of your brand. That is your foundation, right? That you're building. Now, tactically, you can plug in, that's the art side, let's say, right? And that's evolved again because typically it used to come through very specific channels and platforms. And now that comes through a broader spectrum of channels. However, then there's marketing activity that directly drives revenue, directly looks at, right? You can use year over year metrics to be able to measure, are you, increasing, decreasing? Is the strategy affecting those things? One without the other leaves something very important behind. And so I think it is a matter of retuning that based on where customers and consumers are today. What are those most effective pathways to be able to drive your brand message with those audiences?
And we could probably spend another half hour. I won't get it. But in terms of the tools that are now being introduced and some of the artificial intelligence tools that can help you in terms of the analytical side, the creative side, in terms of content generation and thinking about image generation, and then also help you parse out the data that you're collecting in terms of making that tactical decision making. That's also part of it, as well as you think about how the role of the marketer is evolving, and some of these things such as AI are potentially in enhancements. But to your point, it needs to be complementary, right? Like it can't be, you can't just let it run on its own. It needs that kind of human intervention as well.
Yeah, there's still fundamentally in marketing, the mindset, for me, my approach is create demand, serve demand. That still sits as your fundamental framework. Within that, as you just described, everything is evolving. And so how you do that certainly requires a lot of strategic intent, and it requires a lot of ways to do it effectively in the marketplaces and the consumers that we in the circumstances that we have that change, quite often. But I think but ultimately that's the framework: creating demand, serving that demand, and then what are your strategies and objectives and tactics that sit underneath that? And how are you doing that with intent? I think that's the other thing, right? My idea of the transactional, operational, foundational pieces of marketing and the inspirational, motivational, emotional pieces of marketing all have to be done with a really high degree of intent to ensure that you're doing right by the brand and right by consumers.
So I have one final question. And one of the things that we talked about when we met at Shop Talk about a month ago was store expansion. And that's the primary channel for growth is physical retail for Primark. Tell us a little bit about some of that store expansion that's planned. I know you have an exciting project at Herald Square coming soon. And as you think about it from a marketer's point of view, how do you, with these new customers, new markets coming into the fold, how do you think about not only creating that top funnel awareness, but also that retention as new customers come into the fold?
Right. I think, well, I mean, fundamentally, our store expansion serves what I spoke about earlier, which is we have such excellence in our store experience that we're really confident in the markets that we're going into that we can continue to deliver that shopping experience for our customers and continue to make more people aware of what that is and drive them into our stores. The Manhattan opening is very exciting for us, especially in Herald Square, where we will be located in a global market like New York on probably the most iconic retail street in America. And so I think that is a signal to the industry that we're a brand that matters in the US. And then also we are very much looking forward to serve all the consumers and customers that go through that store or come to that store as a destination to experience our brand. I think we're always looking for ways, Joe, to continue to kind of serve our consumer in the US, like kind of building that ecosystem where we can start to look at how do we drive them back into store on a more frequent basis? How do we ensure that we understand who they are as a consumer and learn more about why they shop with us and how they shop with us? I think all of that is part of our ambition in the United States here as we've gotten the footprint right over the last several years, now it's time to start to think about what's the full ecosystem that we create around our customers and how can we help expand that and drive more equity in the brand and our brand messaging.
Yeah, you've laid that foundation and now it's time to
Exactly.
scale. Yeah. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to talk today with Rene Federico. She again is the U.S. head of marketing at Primark. It's really been a fun conversation. Thanks for taking the time today, Rene.
Thanks so much for having me on, Joe.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.
Optimove, the leader in positionless marketing, empowers marketers to instantly deliver real-time personalization. Boosting campaign efficiency by 88%, it allows marketers to do anything and be everything. Go to optimove.com/totalretail to get your first month free when buying Optimove's positionless marketing platform.